Namaste. Krishna says, O Partha Arjuna, in whatever way I am approached, in that way do I respond. All men come by whatever path to me. And so many people think of God in different ways, and I suppose you could think of him as a sacred crocodile, and he would come to you. You have to remember that it's not just your beliefs. Many people say they say that it's your belief that counts. Your beliefs don't mean anything. People used to believe that the world is flat. That didn't make it flat. But when you approach God that way, in a very interesting passage in I think it's the first chapter of St. John, the Gospel of St. John, it says, as many as received him, to them gave he power to become the sons of God. And received does not mean as many as believed in him. Christians today think that's what it means. So you receive God by getting baptized, you receive God by going to church. What does baptism do for you? You look at the realities. People become baptized. Are they different after baptism? No, the real baptism is when you have been blessed by the divine power. When you've had a great vision, you can tell whether a vision is true or not, because if it's true, it changes your life. And so, when you receive Christ, this means this is what the disciple must do with the Guru. It isn't enough just to listen to him. It isn't enough just to read his words and write them down. To receive him means to receive him in your heart. Now, how do you attune yourself to that level of consciousness in the Guru? Well, one thing is to visualize his eyes. The eyes are the windows of the soul. When I looked in my Guru's eyes, it was just an incredible experience. And it was a real experience. That is to say, it wasn't just the expression in his eyes. There was something much deeper. I would be across the room, and I used to be pretty blind. I've had laser surgery, so I see well now. But in those days, I couldn't see across the room well. But he would look at me, and I would just feel flooded by this love. I would just have tears in my eyes. And often just being in his presence, I would feel so much bliss that I just couldn't do anything but sit and meditate. And I have to admit that it was a great frustration to me, because he knew that I had a work to do. He told me many times, Walter, you have a great work to do. And one time he said to me that apart from St. Len, his most advanced disciples, all men have disappointed me, and you mustn't disappoint me. And he looked at me with such pleading and power, and I vowed I would not, but of course I never intended to. What did he mean when he said all men have disappointed me? There's a difference between men and women. Men's energy is outward, even their sexual organs are outward, and women's is more inward. And so for spreading a work, male energy is needed. And he wanted me to spread his work. He wanted me to bring this teaching to everybody. I wanted to. It was my nature to want to. But he said, so many men, they've only come and thought of their own spiritual advancement. He didn't want this. He wanted people who would take up the sword and fight for him, as I have done, not literally, but to bring people to the wisdom of their own souls. I have tried to slash and slash left and right to help them get rid of their delusions. This is my passion, you might say. But he told me that, he said, you mustn't disappoint me, and I have tried my best not to. Because his mission in this world was something very real. He came into this world not just as another saintlet, you might say, not a respectful word, so let me say saint, but he came with a mission to a whole era. He came as William the Conqueror to change the Western civilization. I have read it by two historians, I have read their statements, that everything we are today we owe to William the Conqueror. It's an unbelievable statement. but he changed just about every aspect of human life. And Yogananda also brought a change into this world that will change civilization really from from the bottom up. The change civilization from the bottom up. My self-imposed duty, he told me, your life is one of meditation, editing, no, leave out the meditation, writing, editing, and lecturing. And the meditation was almost secondary. He wanted me to do this work. And so I have done it. I wanted to be a hermit. I wanted to spend my life meditating. When I came to him, I spent most of my time meditating when I wasn't working. But I've gradually come to see that he's depending on me to spread these teachings. No one else has understood how very vital his teachings are in education, in society, in family life, in government, in every phase that I can think of modern life. And I have tried again and again to write books that would show how his teachings are relevant to all of those different aspects. Education, he started a school in India and it was very popular. But then he had to give it up because he came to America and he realized that if he was going to get children in the school, he had to convert the parents first so they wouldn't send those children. And so I remember him saying in Ranchi when he had his school there, many people graduating from Ranchi went to a normal worldly life. He said this is better. We have people who join because they know what they want and they want to give their lives to God. Well, that was true. But they still didn't understand. Most people who came to him thought in terms of what they would get out of it. And I knew that his work would reach everybody. Education needs desperately to be changed. They drive people to the brink of insanity with the way they train them, thinking that the whole purpose of education is to make money so you can support yourself. No, education should be a practice for teaching you how to live in this world, teaching you what will make you happy, teaching you what will make you unhappy, teaching you how to get along with other people. I remember an interesting episode in our school at Ananda. The first snowfall fell, and the children began having a snowball fight. And I know that most of you have probably never even seen snow, but this is something that people do who live in snowy countries. They make balls and throw them at each other. Well, the little children were weeping because they couldn't fight back. They couldn't throw as hard. And then the children decided to make a snowman. And so everybody worked together, children, younger children, older children, and so on. And everybody pitched in to build this snowman. So our teachers then thought of this as a wonderful opportunity. So they called the school together and they said, which did you enjoy more? So from their own experience, they were able to see. And the thing they all agreed that was that they enjoyed much more making that snowman. Well, why? Well, because we were working together, and the other one, we were competing with each other. So this way, the children learn that cooperation is much more important than competition. What is the dogma today? Compete, compete, compete. There was one man who he asked the senior class of a business college to come and be with him on the top floor to see what the business looked like from the top. And he asked them this question: supposing, how did he ask it? Supposing you were with other people competing for a job, how should you behave? He said, I expect you as prospective businessmen to be ruthless, to know that some people won't get that job, but you can. And I expect you to be at each other's throats. I expect you to fight each other for your position. I expect you to be realistic. Well, that may be realism in one sense, but it's not realism in the divine sense. And in our teaching and in my books on business and so on, I say you will get much more if you share with other people, if you make them feel that you are cooperating with them. And so in our school system, we teach people the importance of working together, of kindness. We say that it's much more fulfilling to you, and it'll also be more fulfilling in your work if people all pitch in and work together. So in my books that I have done, I've tried to show how my guru's teachings are, even if they are on a mundane level, and of course business would be considered a mundane level, but I have shown in those books, all of them, how practicing spiritual principles, you will have more success. I believe that if people are interested in something, catch them where their interest is. I had an interesting experience many years ago, in 1960, 59 in fact. I was in Shimla, and I was invited to speak at a men's college. Well, I didn't know the terrain, and I was walking, and I didn't know how far it was, and I misjudging the distance. I came there 20 minutes after I had been supposed to arrive, and I was met at the bottom of this hill by the president of the student body, on whose recommendation I had been invited to speak to the student body. And he was literally trembling. He said, "I don't know how they'll receive you. I think you should cancel." He said that it's not only that you are late and they're all going home to their villages and so on, it's also that China has just made incursions onto Indian soil, and all the students have finished writing a petition in blood to protest this invasion. So their emotions are very disturbed and excited. And he said, listen to them, and I could hear them up on the hilltop, and they're all hundreds of people, hundreds of young men stamping their feet and shouting. And I said, look, I have promised to come, so I will try. And he said, well, don't blame me if they throw you out. And the president of the college, with a very nervous tremor in his voice, asked me to introduce me and said that I would speak to them. Well, I was supposed to speak on yoga. Well, after all, if your emotions are that disturbed, you're not going to be ready to hear a lecture on peace. So what I did was take them where they were interested. This is a very important principle. Catch people in their present interest and then bring them around to your point of view. Very few people talk like that. They talk of their own convictions. You have not only to lecture, but to communicate. So I talked about the invasion of China, Chinese incursions onto Indian soil. That incursion was only 80 miles from where they were, so naturally their emotions were involved. And then I began saying, but what really causes this lack of peace? Ultimately, it's because we don't have peace in ourselves. The people in China are all desirous of invading you. You're all anxious because they are invading you. You can't do things clearly in that way. So the first thing you must understand, if you want peace in this world, is to gain peace in yourself. And the more you have of peace, the more you'll be able to accomplish everything. And so bit by bit, I led them from the reason they had signed their names in blood back to the thought that I wanted to teach them, which is the peace that you get from practicing yoga. And then I came around to that, and they were completely on my side by that time, because I'd caught them where they were interested. They were listening on the edge of their seats. And then when I finished my talk, I allowed them to ask questions. Well, they asked questions for about an hour, and the principal of the school had to keep reminding them that their last bus would be leaving for their villages. Still they wanted to ask more. And finally, I myself had to say, well, look, you have to take your buses, so I will stop. But I created a great deal of interest in them, and I did it by going where they were rather than where I was coming from. And so Krishna is saying here also, in whatever form you worship God, in that form he will come to you. So if you have this desire, why should he come in that way? If you are a scientist, the inspirations you get will be of a scientific nature. If you are a poet, the inspirations will be of a poetic nature. If you're a composer, it will be of a music nature. If you're a businessman, everything is God. There's nothing materialistic about business. I have to say that I used to think there was. Then I found that the most advanced disciple of my guru was a very, very prosperous businessman. And I had to do a little rethinking there. But I know, I grew up in Esso, which at that time was the largest company in the world, and my father had a high position in that. And so I had tested that idea of monetary success, and it meant nothing to me. I just didn't want it. But if you seek your answers in a material way, they will come to you. And I've seen in building Ananda, I have had to learn to be a good businessman, but not for myself, for what I was attempting to accomplish. And I remember we had there was a lumber company that I used to buy lumber for our buildings, and I ran out of money and I had to go out and earn more. So I got all the people to whom I owed money to accept $500 a month until I brought it up to date, and this man agreed too. But the next thing I knew was he put a lien on my property and then threatened me with foreclosure. And I called him and I said, look, you promised, you accepted to my $500 a month. He said, well, but you see, a man has to be practical. It means greedy, of course. Well, I was in Palo Alto and I was showing some slides of India. And somebody afterwards said, would you accept a donation? I said, sure, I expected $5 or $10. He leaned over a car and wrote a check for $3,000. I phoned this man, I said, I happen to have the money to pay you, but I won't do so. I'll wait until you incur all the debts you can, and then I'll pay it off. And so he said, oh, pay me now and I'll give you a big discount. So he tried to dig a pit for me and fell into it himself. But Dharma will always take you to success. Joy to you.